Hey everyone, sorry I'm in my car. There's a lot of construction going on in my house right now. I just want to talk a little bit about the Wife of Bath, her prologue, and her tale in Canterbury Tales. I'm looking at an article right now that talks a little bit about how there's a lot of contradictions in a lot of her philosophy when she starts to talk about the fact that she believes that wives should dominate their husbands, but then several times throughout the story she talks about how she was happiest when her husband was in control and she was obedient to him. And then she was also when she during her tale, the knight is happy. Sorry, the other wife is also submissive to the knight, and they both live perfectly happy. So there's a couple of contradictions that are outlined in that article by someone named McGee. So McGee is saying that there are so many contradictions that Chaucer could possibly be using this as an anti-feminist tool, that the Wife of Bath is a device that Chaucer is using to in light of other because a few anti-feminist authors are listed. The guy that wrote the book that the Wife of Bath's fifth husband was reading. Now, I disagree. I don't think Chaucer is using her as an anti-feminist tool. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that totally, like concretely. That I think she could be a anti-feminist tool, but I also think she could be a feminist one. I think that Chaucer kind of lets the reader do the work. There's a lot of characters being presented that Chaucer sort of just presents and says, "Hey, what do you think?" And a lot of the characters that are being presented have really subverted sort of outlooks and worldviews. As an example, there's a monk who is supposed to be saintly. Monks at this time gave up a lot of life's luxuries, but he lived very heartily. He goes hunting. There's a friar that hangs out in the bars, and he knows where all the good pubs are. There is a nun who dresses very well, and she's very stylish, even though a nun is supposed to live a life of sort of minimalness. And the knight, the very first character mentioned, he is a man of blood and warfare, and yet he is the most contrite, and he's probably one of the few people who are on this journey to Canterbury in earnest for the religious reasons that the shrine at Canterbury was being traveled for. Everybody else is sort of just having fun and having a vacation. So a lot of the characters are kind of subverted in Canterbury Tales, and I feel like Wife of Bath is another one where she just sort of challenges a lot of stereotypes. That is what she is. She is a wife. More than anything else, that is what her identity is the wife of the wife of Bath. And yet, it's so funny that that's how she defines herself. And yet, the definition, her wifeness is not at all what you would expect from a wife in the mid 14th century. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the contradictions. I think that I find it challenging because I think that one of the things that is most challenging is the fact that she's outrightly saying that she wants to dominate the husband. It seems like she's okay with, in practice, having kind of a civil back and forth. Really, more she wants recognition and suffrage rather than dominance. Even though the lifestyle she lives is definitely one of dominance. She dominates 5 men and gets rid of them and then starts over again. And she likes young men. But her story, which if we take her story to be her ideal, then you have this knight who ends up being very happy with this woman just because he gave her the choice of what she wanted to do with her own body. Now that's significant to me. So I'm not really sure what to think. But I do think that it would be really hard for anyone to prove that Chaucer is definitely using the Wife of Bath to be an anti-feminist device. I think that Chaucer likes to complicate the matter. I think he wants there to be no clear answer, but rather he wants to raise questions about what we think about women and what women should or shouldn't do. I think it's because the gender role, and the importance placed on them, in medieval culture is so significant. I think he's really just sort of bringing up more questions. I want to talk a little bit also about something I found in another article that said that she wanted to be, this is talking more about the sensuality of the wife of Bath, and that she really enjoyed her last lover, who was very good in bed, and that she liked being dominated. And I think she even uses the phrase, his love was dangerous to me. And so I'm not going to go too far into what that could possibly mean. I just wanted to bring up, for the sake of this presentation, something that I was reading. There's an article written by C.S. Lewis called Equality, where Lewis discusses the idea that he doesn't think that slavery is masterhood. I shouldn't say slavery. He doesn't think that the relationship between a master and slave is bad inherently. It's only bad because we're fallen. And it's not that there's no people that are fit to be slaves. Lewis in that article says that everybody is fit to be a slave. We're all slave material, but there are no fit masters among us. And that's why the relationship between master and slave was so abused throughout humanity that we've done away with it. He says, but just because we've done away with it, he thinks that equality is more like medicine, not food. Medicine is something that you take because you are sick. It is not good in and of itself. Medicine is only good because there is a sort of disease or something wrong there. So he thinks that the idea of mastery is not necessarily bad in and of itself, but it's that in our flawed world, we need equality in order to live. And so in that article, he talks about, if a woman does, again, this might not be, this is not my opinion necessarily, but that even if a woman wanted to have dominance over her husband, that the very embrace of the male requires some form of subjection as a female. I'm not going to get into the technical details about that, but it did definitely make me think about the wife of Bath, in that she liked to dominate her husband, and at the same time she loved having sex with her husbands, and she was very sensual, and she loved when they dominated her that way. And so even the reason why I can kind of say that with a little bit of confidence is that at the end of her tale, she says, let's find good young men that are good in bed. So there's that. I don't know, maybe that's, Lewis himself was a medievalist, maybe that's where he got the idea from. There's a lot of theological ideas in The Wife of Bath. I think that she is purposely misreading a lot of the scripture that is going into her philosophy. If you believe that scripture is final, then there's no argument there. She's wrong. If you believe that's, I'm not going to go into a debate of, well, what could if we could figure out how to misread scripture. I think that's silly. So I do want to point out one last thing that is sort of a interesting something in scripture that the wife of Bath made me think of, was when God is talking to Eve in the garden, and he says to Eve, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. The second part I understood, he shall rule over you. I don't know if that's necessarily an ordained thing, or God is just saying what's going to happen, because we can't deny throughout history men have pretty much dominated women. And I don't know that that's necessarily a God ordained thing, or God is just telling her what's going to happen because of sin. I do have more questions about, what does it mean by your desire shall be over him? What is really weird is that later on in Genesis, a couple chapters later, when Cain is being addressed by God, he says that sin is at the door, and its desire is over you. It's the same language. If you look it up, it's the same language that's used when God is talking to Eve. So I don't know, is that necessarily something that the Bible is saying that men should resist, that women's desires should be over them? I don't know. I think the best thing, I kind of like the wife of Bath's tale, because I like that the knight kind of figures out, you know what, do what you want, and that's sort of a lovely thing. I think that there should be submission to one another, and suffrage, and I think that that's a very modern thing to come out of that story, even though the rest of the story might be a little weird and the character might be a little flawed. So yeah, so that's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to my opinions that you didn't ask for, and I hope you guys have a lovely day.